Well, what an absolute treat it is on this Tuesday evening to have Mikey join us once again. I think the last time we did this was a Sunday session, but we'll make it a Tuesday, 2 or 3 beers. We're flat out busy. Gonna need the glasses for how in depth this is going to get, but back into the housing market, mate. Obviously, since we last spoke on this, things have just been going nuts, and I think to read you a couple of pieces of data, New Zealand median house price hit a record high of 725,000 in October, nearly 20% higher than a year earlier. The median price also hit a fresh record of $1 million. I don't have $1 million. I'm sure most people in Auckland don't. How the hell are they buying a house?
Yeah, it's interesting, I'd like to actually go back and watch our last one and see how long ago it was and see what I said and see if I was right. I might have actually come up short on a few predictions.
Well, if I was better prepared, I would have gone back and listened to that, but I was off recording my own predictions. But so what's going on? Are you still writing loans and you're helping people get into homes? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, it's massive. December, in terms of the mortgage world, December's going to be my business's biggest month ever. What's interesting, though, is that the average loan size hasn't changed that much. I think what interest rates have, I don't think there's bigger loans as such being taken out. There's just more people doing it. And it is more affordable. Like, I feel like if we had half the people over here and half the people over here, one half was pretty keen to go on an OE and they've got sort of like some money lined up, and the other half are going to buy a house anyway. And now we've just got all of that group being like, oh, I'm not going anywhere. Let's load it into housing.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously, when we have prices go like this, it's no matter what, it's driven by demand. Doesn't matter what you say. Like, it does interest rates, whatever. Like, it's driven by demand for it. But I think the product of this demand is the low rates and the basically Reserve Bank and the governments and banks and stuff saying that we'll have low rates for a while, so we can get an affordable repayment and just start paying it down. So,
well, you know a lot about the economy, mate. What do you think about rates? I'll ask you the tough question. It's the one that everyone loves talking about. Interest rates, are they going to go lower?
Yep. So there's my crystal ball's pretty dusty at the moment, because I made all these predictions and they've come true and surpassed it. So like it's sort of blowing me away a bit because I made some pretty brash calls. But so we've got this thing coming without geeking out completely over it, called the Funding for Lending program, which is basically the Reserve Bank's going to push more credit or debt, as people know it, into society via our retail banks. It sounds like that's about 28 billion worth of money to be lent by our banks at even lower rates than we've got now. And that 28 billion is sort of not quite 10% of the total home loan market in New Zealand. So it's a big chunk.
Yeah, that's like fresh. So you're saying like fresh debt. That can go
hot off the press. Yeah, wow. Hot off the press. It's quite. I get like real excited about it, but it's probably when. Yeah. We're probably going to see rates lower for sure. How low they can go, it's anyone's guess. I think with the Funding for Lending program and what it's going to go out the door at from the Reserve Bank to the retail banks, they could go down to 1.6-ish.
Yeah.
But if they go that low, I don't know.
So the reason that they're pumping this much debt and liquidity into the market, is that to ensure that we avoid unemployment effectively, right? Because it's not there to fuel the housing bubble, is it? But that's the other side of these decisions that they're making.
Yeah. So I've sort of been saying, like, man, you just need to scroll through Facebook to see all the people whinging about house prices rising, you know? I just wish heaps of those people would sort of not whinge that much about house price rises and work out how to make more money so you can afford stuff. But the product the product of what's happening right now and everyone walking around feeling like it's fine, that's not happening in the rest of the world. Like there's places in the world where people aren't financially okay, and there's definitely some hurt here. But like I'm in Kingsland at the moment, and the road's busy, the bars are full. Like it's no different to the middle of February this year. It's pumping.
Yeah.
And like you can complain about house prices, but what happens is the money gets sort of printed, and without going into too much detail, it's flowed into societies. A lot of it comes out as debt, and it goes and gets spent throughout the economy, and a lot of it gets unloaded into housing. But the reason that we all feel okay right now, and that lots of people have still got jobs and people are making money and money's still moving around, is thanks to that. And house price rises, unfortunately, have been a bit of a byproduct.
So what, for those people that were perhaps getting close to buying a home and now they're feeling a bit cheated that potentially the property they're looking to buy has now become out of reach, like what would you say to them, or have you been having those types of conversations? You've obviously been going to auctions where your clients aren't getting houses that they were hoping for.
Yeah, so it's a massive topic of conversation at the moment. So it's basically, if you're worried that this is going to keep going forever, then, and you really do want a house, then you need to put your money into an asset, into a house, so that your money's parked in the market that's moving. If you're like me, then I just don't worry about any of this stuff. But you know, like if you might have been looking at 3 or 4 bedrooms with 2 bathrooms, it might be time to change what you thought you could get. Park your money up. And I say this all the time, especially like to first home buyers, just remember it's your first house. It doesn't have to be your last house. You know, like not many people just stay in their first house for their whole life. Like you don't have to do that. Just park it in a property. If they do keep going up, that will keep going up as well, and then you'll be able to take that equity onto the next property.
Yeah, I love that, mate. And that's, I guess, the thing that I worry about for people is that if you're not in the market and you can't control your income, you're probably the profile of the person you don't want to be right now, right? Because you're not going with the flow of the river in terms of the increase in the stock market or the housing market, and you're slowly getting left behind. And that is, you know, a downside to this, and probably a hard thing for people to talk about. But yeah, I guess changing your expectations, and then also, you know, trying to get around some people that can help you figure out how you can achieve what it is that you're trying to achieve, and even just understanding that, yeah, just because loans are out over 30 years doesn't mean that's how long you're going to live in this property, right?
Absolutely. I think last time you brought up something that was about retirement, where you buy the house where you might want to retire. So like that model is, I talk to people as well, like you don't have to use your KiwiSaver to buy your first home. You can still have your KiwiSaver going pretty sweet if you've got some other deposit that you can put towards a home and it's not your own home. Like go and park it in, I don't know, a rental in New Plymouth or something, you know. The rent will help pay down the mortgage. You can chip away at it. You keep your KiwiSaver, and you can either sell it or leverage against it in the future. I don't know. I don't agree with the FOMO that's happening. So it's like I sold a property. It's settled today. I bet you I feel way better than the people that are buying right now. So, you know, like, I sort of do the opposite a bit. But yeah, if you really do want to do it and get into it, then man, it doesn't have to be like the traditional quarter acre Kiwi dream. just have a think about it, talk to an advisor, and work out like a financial plan almost around it.
Very smart, mate, and something that a lot of people don't do is actually plan long term with their finances, right? So, what about talk to me about LVR, this LVR thing. What's a bloody LVR, mate? Everyone's typing around everywhere.
So the LVR is the loan to value ratio. So it's basically how much lending you've got out towards against the value of the total property. So if you've got $1 million home and it's got a 900K mortgage on it, and you've put in 100K, that's what we call that a high LVR. That's a 90% LVR loan.
Yeah.
So that's basically 90% of the property is lending, and 10% is basically your part, or simply 90% is owned by the bank.
Yeah. So they changed those rules recently. Is that right? Although they've like moved them back to what was in place.
Back out of the first lockdown, they waived those rules instantly. The banks were really impressive. I personally think they didn't just go, oh, cool, there's no rules anymore, we can just lend whatever we want. They were real sensible and kept their own rules in place. They did drop, for me, putting home applications in, not too much changed. Property investors were allowed to put in less, so they sort of went from requiring a 30% deposit down to 20% deposit, and that's already been put back up by the banks. So there was a bit of noise in the media. There was a letter that went from our finance minister to our Reserve Bank governor. That was quite cool to watch, and then the reply back was very good to watch too. And as soon as that sort of noise happened, and the Reserve Bank made a comment on their monetary policy announcement about that they're going to put LVRs back in for investors in March next year, the banks went like that and did it pretty much straight away. So they're already prepared for it. Like this whole year, I have to admit that banks have been pretty impressive, in my opinion.
So here's a technical one for you, mate. Say someone's got approval for a loan and that's for a year, but by the time they get to sell their property, the LVR rules have been changed in the meantime. Do they then have to come up with the difference of that deposit? And can people get caught out in any way? Have you seen that happening?
Another part where the banks have been impressive is, they won't give you an approval for a year anyway. Different banks, different strokes kind of things, but 60 to 90 days is the general sort of rule. Most banks were honouring the approvals that were existing when they changed the rules, but they won't give you an extension on the approval when it drops. If the settlements of the property is outside of that, then they wanted you to get your loan documents issued before the approval expired.
I see.
So, yeah, that's part of what's fun about my game is like I know all that, and then people ask me a question like that, and I get to be like, "Nah, it's sweet. I know how to handle this."
Yeah. That's why you use an advisor, right? Someone that you can actually ask those types of questions.
Yeah, I mean there was a few when the rules changed that had settlements in January 2021. And I just rang the client and said, hey, look, we're not going to be able to get the approval extended for the next one because of the rule change. We've just got to get loan documents out now. No problem.
Yeah. So the people that you're seeing buy property, and even maybe if you've got any data around who are buying property, is it people that have already got a property and they're wanting to double down on property, or is it first home buyers? Like, what's really fueling that market? Because from what I've seen in terms of some of our clients, only a very small sample size, but there is a lot of this kind of mum and dad sort of use the leverage in their property or use the assets they've built up over time and saying, can you put 8 units on this piece of land? And going back to what you said about demand, now I'm probably going on a tangent, but I feel like even if we just saturated the market with supply overnight, there'd still be demand there because everyone's so obsessed with property. So I don't necessarily think that everyone thinks we'll just build more houses, we'll solve this, but it doesn't. For me, I'm like, well, it's not going to solve the fact people are obsessed with buying property.
Yeah, it's a funny one, eh? That's why I don't like the FOMO stuff that's going on. Like, and I sort of say, like, be careful what you wish for. If you keep complaining and putting more and more rules on the market, and then build more and more and more, we might wake up in a different spot one day, eh? And then stuff gets interesting. But yeah, for me, and I definitely have a base in my contact database that are people that are thinking about buying their first investment, or maybe doing that, cutting up a section. And I think, and it's got nothing to do with mortgages, because I'm younger, I just relate to first home buyers more, and most of my stuff is in that bracket.
Yeah.
I definitely have like a base of investors who know that I'm an investor as well, and I've muck around with it, so they want me to do their stuff. And there's definitely been a bit more heat from them, like they've wanted to act faster and stuff like that, but it's not the bulk of it. The bulk of it is first home buyers and people upgrading.
So, because I read some data, and I'd love you to do some research for me to finish my job off here, but that only 17,000 people actually have more than 2 properties. So it's not as many people as you think. So is that accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. It's all those numbers. I can't remember exactly what they are, but I know the ones you're looking at. That's almost like a perfect reflection of what my investor database looks like. There's a percentage of that. It gets smaller and smaller, and then people with 5+ don't really use mortgage brokers that much. But yeah, it's not a big number, and they get a hard rap, you know. I mean, no one complains about someone owning heaps and heaps of shares.
No, shit. 250,000 users of shares. He's now 900 million. You know, it's all happening. Question from the crowd. Aidan McLaughlin think he's got a very red background, if you know what I mean. And I'm talking about the bank, Westpac, not the political party. But Mikey, do you see many parents buying properties for their kids as investment properties initially, with the kids renting off them, essentially paying the mortgage, with the medium-term aim for the kids to buy the property at whatever the mortgage balance is at a point in time?
Yep.
There you go. Yep.
Yeah, so what we're seeing at the moment more than the last couple of years is a bit of a transfer, a bit of the passing of the torch. So we're seeing that where parents are going to buy a rental property, and then the kids renting it off them, and then in the future it will get gifted on type thing. The other one is the massive transfer of gifting that I see, which is great. I'm a massive advocate for it, because parents are sick of it sitting in the bank account getting 0.1%. Might as well have their kids buy a nice property. That's cool. And then kids learn about using leverage and stuff like that in the future. So we're seeing lots of that from that classic boomer generation that everyone talks about.
Yeah.
It's going to be a big transfer of that, more and more of that, probably over the next 10 years, I'd say. But yeah, we see it for sure.
I had a mate who two parts to this story. One, he went to an auction and they thought the house would go for about 800,000, and that 8 starting with an 8. And they thought, they thought it would go for $1 million, so they didn't want to go. Real estate agent laughed at them and said, "You're dreaming. This thing's an $800,000 property." They actually sold for 1.375 on the day, so they didn't buy that one. Agent got that one, for a little bit wrong, but anyway, it happens. Then I next spoke to him. He said that they brought a property, and they got in on their final bid for I think 915, and basically there was only one other person bidding, and they admitted after it was the dad that was bidding on behalf of the children, and said, "Oh, I got a little bit itchy and just kept bidding, but we're actually supposed to stop at 890, I think it was, and the reserve was like 905, so kind of cost him 10 grand because this dude kept bidding just because he knew, well, we've got cash to back it up if we want to get this property." So they tapped out. So
that's the thing, it's like Yeah, I mean, it's hard to beat 60-year-old money when you're 30, like if it's real hard to beat. But yeah, there's definitely that stuff happening, and it's a massive part of it. I think also, like I use my parents as an example, like they're meant to be in Italy right now doing like a probably like somewhere in the region of like 30 to 50 grand trip around Europe.
Yeah.
They just came back from Dargaville, but
Yeah.
they're like little tour of the North Island instead. But like that kind of money that doesn't get spent and probably won't for a couple of years, hopefully not too long, but that's sitting there. And if I was their kid and in a tougher position at struggling, knowing that I could lean on 50 grand extra at an auction, it's going to flow through.
Yeah. And we
Yeah.
spoke about it for a long time, didn't we? We talked about it. I think I wrote about it in I Keep the Change about for the first time. And even my dad said it to me. He was going, what's the point of us sitting on this money waiting to die to pass it on to you guys? So, times that out by these people across the country. Not that that's what's happened, but, there's a big change of thinking that comes when an interest rate becomes so low for a deposit holder, right?
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they would have had mortgage rates, 15 to 20%. So they can see that the hard part for our generation is the deposit, but the other part for them is like an opportunity to get something really affordable if one part of it's taken care of.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're gonna continue to see that for quite a while.
So, well, two parts. This is a yes/no answer. Do you believe that house prices will double in the next two? Actually, I ask you two questions. I'm going to ask you three questions, but I'm just thinking as I'm going here. Firstly, will house prices double? This is yes or no in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
Good. That's two words, but that's supposed to only be one.
It's such a technical answer, though. But yeah.
Part B to that is, will it happen faster than 10 years? I've got it on here.
Such a deep question. They could halve.
Ooh.
Yeah. Imagine that.
You truly believe that we could see that in our lifetime?
Oh, look, it's 100% how the system of debt and credit works. Absolutely, house prices can fall.
Yeah.
Yeah, they like it's not. It just doesn't seem like it in New Zealand. Like we've got lots of history that says that it won't happen. But long term, 100%, it's probably quite safe. Like as New Zealand is known around the world, like it's got resources, it's beautiful. There's still quite a lot of land. You can get a job here, make good money. Like New Zealand will always be valuable to any sort of dollar. Like it's getting long term, it's fine. But house prices can halve. You just don't want to be on the wrong end of that when it happens. If you can write it out, it's sweet.
Just like any long financial asset, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's probably quite a few people around that would have lost 30 or 40% in the share market in March because they shit themselves and might not have made that back, That can happen in housing too. But if you rode it out to now, then you've probably made your money back and it's all back to square.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think house prices are going to increase more. There's huge amounts of resource consent being issued. There's a lot of development on. I feel like it's more like townhouses and new builds and Kiwi builds and all that kind of stuff coming through to the market than there ever has been before. Which will, I mean, and that they did that in Christchurch, and Christchurch prices have stayed pretty flat thanks to a bit of saturation. But yeah, it's hard to not say that Auckland's going to keep going up in value as the main hub. Low interest rates, long time. We could see 50% house prices between now and 3 years away.
Increase.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of chat if you dig deep externally out of New Zealand that we're heading into a depression or something similar to the 1930s. My sort of gut feeling is that we'll probably shit the bed and freak out if that does become what everyone starts talking about internationally. But our economy is sort of not like other economies at the moment because we are, we're not in lockdown. We're not like losing jobs everywhere. Businesses aren't defaulting on a heap of debt, bar, certain industries and things. So, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens if there is an international depression or contraction, but then as a nation, we're still kind of humming along, which is, I guess, is kind of what is already happening, but we're just so in our bubble. Like if you just read stuff in the Herald, all you're reading about is house prices going up, and that's about it. Versus 19% of businesses in America failing to meet their debt obligations and things like that, and the economy contracting 4%, and planes being locked away forever, and all the realities of what's really happening internationally. We're just like, oh fuck, my house price is going up. It's all good.
Yeah, it's a really hard one to figure out that part of it, eh? Like one of the other reasons why New Zealand feels so good is because we've got so much money flow happening. I think because we feel like everything's okay, we're just spending normally, and it's just passing hands, and it's just carrying on really well. Whereas in other places, that's getting stopped hard.
So I guess if we can keep employment going well, which seems to be what we're trying to do, it seems like the government and the Reserve Bank, whoever's controlling all this stuff, still has like the kitchen sink to throw at the next wave of shit hitting the fan.
Yeah, so kind of what's left in the accounts, sort of, that we could use, we can do that all again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't want to because, yeah. I mean, yeah. If we get to that stage, then there's nothing else. But yeah, it's really interesting. I still can't figure out what the hangover will be from the rest of the world not being okay. It's a real tough one to work out. But yeah, I'm not traditionally a Labour voter, right? But I give props to how they handled it all.
Yeah.
Man, I was like, nah, I don't like lockdowns. I like my control, but nah, right now, just sold a house and buying a new car. Like, I'm thankful.
Very grateful. Yeah. I think we can't argue that we're, compare. If you want to compare our economy and our living situation to other countries, we are in a good place. Halfway through here, mate, I just want to ask you a pop question. Do you know what I was doing at 2 p.m. yesterday afternoon?
Shit. Nah, I don't. Probably something real geeky.
You got it. I was watching the Heart Bank AGM live online.
Oh, good.
Yeah, nice. I was going to go. It was at Eden Park, and I was going to go and just turn up and be like that young guy that was there. But I just didn't know. I couldn't be bothered, and so I didn't know. But I tuned in and watched it online, and it was really interesting. But what they were talking about is how they've been able to digitalize a lot of their banking offerings, and therefore decrease the costs of a lot of the lending, which is they've then been able to, beat the other banks to the market with lower rates purely because they know they can be cheaper because they've decreased their costs. So quite cool to see like a different strategy, and then some that people have from them. They're actually launching a financial literacy program, which I thought sounded quite sweet because obviously, we're both into that. But I did think, okay, there's a strategy behind this, and I bet it's around mainstreaming the brand and also bringing in younger people through their banking system. So those are my takeaways from the AGM.
Do you remember when you were at primary school and you got a little yellow piggy bank from ASB?
Oh, mate, I grew up in Dannyburg, so ASB was sort of
right. So heaps of Aucklanders were.
We had
it's one of the most genius marketing tools of all time. I remember going to school, and when you'd get a coin or whatever, you'd put it in your little ASB piggy
Elephant.
bank. Yeah, elephant. Yeah, and then you could like a banker would come into school and you could deposit in your account and do the slip and everything. And then at 18, a credit card would get sent to you.
And that's where there's a lot of a lot of back and forth around what banks' roles are in that early banking setup, isn't there? Because there's a sort of you're on the marketing funnel from day one to then turn 18 to then get into the real income generating products.
Yeah, I mean, props to ASBA. That's a long-term marketing plan that was genius.
Yeah, I tell you what, we didn't have ASB in Dannyburg, but when I went to university and they were giving away $1,000 interest-free credit card, I'm like, yo, where have I been? Like, sign me up. I'm like, let's first round on here this weekend.
Oh dear, it's so good.
Thanks,
yeah, it's that. I mean, Heartland's pretty cool. They're getting heavily into that online, even home loan application. That's what the whole 1.99 thing was about. But I saw a Stuff article the other day that BNZ are closing 38 branches over some period of time, so it's all going that way. It'll just be me on the street one day, just doing emails to the banks, mortgage sector.
Yeah, probably logging into their back end, doing the loans for them. I'll get us back on track here, mate, because I know you've got something big to talk about, and that is this huge claim that a loan 10 years ago for 500 grand is the same price or outgoing as a loan today, 10 years on, for $1 million. Now, I think you might even have to re-explain that to just unblow my mind here and try to convince me that you're not lying.
Yeah, so I'm just looking at this other screen here to make sure I got it right, but I'm just looking at 2-year fixed rates in 2010 with about 7.5% to 8%. And now we're looking at closing in on 2%,
Yep.
So a 500K mortgage back in 2010 costs somewhere in the region of about 3.5 grand per month to repay.
Yeah.
And that's exactly where we're about to be with $1 million mortgage now.
Wow.
A little bit of a gap, $100 gap, but basically what 500 grand costs you per repayment 10 years ago is the same as what we've got now. So if you look at our 10-year house price double thing, what do you reckon drove it?
Interest rates going down.
I think, it's not just that, but like we've got people, I think a lot of people buying a house on a repayment, and that repayment hasn't really changed much. Wages haven't done this to make 500K as easy as $1 million. Like everything is sort of been flat, except we've had that drop, which has driven the asset price. There's been different reasons for previous decades, but I think this last decade, that's what it's been.
So what you say, so the problem then becomes the deposit, unless you've got your money stacked in Tesla or probably Bitcoin over the last couple of months.
Yeah, it's harder. I mean, the rate of the increase means that, and income's not rising. This is where the difficult part comes in. The rate of the increase can happen quite fast, and your rate of savings can be quite difficult if you're just on a salary or whatever, So it's hard to, if we've had 20% house prices this year, not many people would be able to increase the amount they save by 20%, like it's a harder thing to sort of get on and do it. But yeah, the 500K mortgage 10 years ago, same as $1 million mortgage right now. Crazy, eh?
Yeah, that is quite mind-blowing. So I guess it's probably not how it would feel to people though as well. And I do wonder if people are, maybe 18 coming into, they got a student loan as well, those types of things, and they're going, I'm just never going to be able to afford a house. So they basically take a route away from property property because they just think it's unattainable. And I actually met some younger people like that a couple of years ago. I wonder if that's going to creep in more.
Oh no, you've dropped off. Are you there?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I left you at some younger couple a few years ago.
Oh, yeah. Just younger people thinking that property is going to be unattainable, and so they just basically stay away from everything property related.
Good. It doesn't like if the biggest thing is like it doesn't have to be your dream, eh?
Mm.
I completely get it if it is. That's how I make a living. But and making sure that people do it safely, but it doesn't people, it baffles people when I say I rent. It just doesn't excite me. I don't feel like paying $1 million for some wood framing. They're a financial asset and I use them as rentals, and heaps of people will disagree with me, but it doesn't have to be. I have like a different mindset of things. If you do really want it, that's awesome and you should, but in sort of like the price is the price. It's out of your control. I just encourage you to like switch your mindset to be like, how do I make this deposit? I make 50 grand a year. What do I need to do?
Yeah.
Probably increase your income.
Yeah.
Work on that, put effort into that instead of put effort into smashing the Herald comments about how shit this is.
Yeah. So maybe a little second job or a side income if you can, or even just, figuring out can you get a pay rise and having that conversation really well.
Nothing bad comes from that, even if you don't buy a house. If you go and get like a second job or work out a side hustle or manage to get a promotion by working hard or whatever it may be, there's no downside to that.
Yeah.
Higher chance of getting your deposit together in a house. Plus, you're probably going to learn a whole lot of shit and make more money.
Yeah. Love it. Good, solid practice.
The world.
We clocked it. There you go. Sarah says she loves that. So,
hey, Sarah.
Tell me, mate, about you were saying that interest rates haven't decreased by 1%; they've decreased by 30%.
Massive one. So I keep going on saying that interest rates are driving this increase in houses, right? And people are saying, but how can a 1% drop in interest rates make the housing market go up by 20% or more in some cases right now? It's a 30% drop in interest rates. So we started sort of this time last year around 3.3 or something like that, just above 3%. If we call it 3.39 and then we call right now 2.39, it's 1% on the interest rate, but it's a 29.5% drop. So if you're paying $1 million mortgage, the interest last year was $33,900. The interest this year is $23,900. So wow. That's a 29.5% drop in your interest amount that you have to pay. Yeah. So understanding that part of it, I actually reckon the interest rate system and how we do it is a little bit, could be improved there, I'll say. Like a drop from 10% to 9% is not the same as 3% to 2%.
Yeah.
It's a massive difference. Like the effect that taking 1% out when you've only got 3 to go versus 1% out when you've got 9 to go is huge. But I mean, they've done it for these reasons. Yeah.
And if people using what they would have paid in interest, so there's those people that have just been chipping away at their mortgages that are actually taking advantage of these lower rates. So they then still paying what they used to pay and paying their debt down.
I encourage it, just get rid of it because you don't know if rates are going to go. Even I don't know, mate, and I'm But rates could definitely go up. But if something strange happen, if inflation catches us out or anything like that, rates can go up, and you don't want to be stuck with a 90% LVR if that happens. The coolest stuff that I've seen is like if someone had a 10% deposit last year and we got them a home, and the interest rate might have been 4.5% or something then, and then this year they might have only paid off 1 or 2% of the principal, but the house has gone up 100 grand. All of a sudden they've got their 20%, they lose all the fees, they get the new interest rate, and like the repayments are dropping massively. And you've got two products then. You can either go and repay down more debt, or you've got hundreds of dollars a week in household cash flow that you didn't have a year ago, which is what they want to do. And that's what we feel. And that's why coffee's still selling really good.
Yeah. Yeah. And what about like people that maybe say young couple, and they're going and buying a property, and then they're getting a flatmate in straight away? I'm sure some people are surely doing that to bring some income. Like, do you disclose that as such to your mortgage advisor? Is that factored into the calcs, or am I not supposed to mention things like that?
Yeah, no, 100%. So banks are really good in that department as well. They'll actually let us include it depending on the client's financial position, but they'll basically let us include it as additional income, tax-free. So yeah, they'll let us actually in certain scenarios borrow a little bit more money if you have a flatmate coming into the house with you. So yeah, 100%. Always tell your mortgage broker that. Like, I could never see myself buying my own house without filling up the rooms and turning it into a boarding house, basically.
Your county, there are rules around boarders versus renting your property out. So just make sure you run that past an accountant before not declaring any cash. One thing we've actually seen from the IRD recently too is they're actually checking the land transfer register to see if you've sold a house within 2 years or 5 years for the bright line rules, which then make your capital gain as such tax. You have to pay tax on it. So they've done that nationwide. So apparently people haven't been adhering to those rules. So there'll be a lot of people going back and redoing their tax returns basically, but it looks like the work's going to start in that space.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that. I don't know, like, it was massive news. Everyone should know about it. Yeah, a place that I just sold settled today, and last week when I was signing it all off, the lawyers that I went to had a whole lot of stuff that I filled out for that. So luckily I bought before all the rules.
Oh yeah, it's interesting. I think there is a bit of a disconnect between the accountants and the lawyers with that stuff. And I think perhaps I shouldn't, I'm speaking out of turn a little bit, but I think maybe the lawyers and even the person selling or buying the property might think, I thought just filling out the form meant that, I was doing everything correctly, but I don't think that's the case.
It's interesting. When I was going to put this place on the market, I kind of didn't know who to ask. And I was like, whenever I get to something like that, I'm like, wonder why that is. And I sort of thought about it, and I asked both. But it's a funny one. Like, if I am in the industry and I have a thought like that, I always go, wonder what everyone else is doing, Yeah. I sort of didn't know if I should ask a lawyer or an accountant about it, because it's kind of the rule, which makes it sound like law. But it's tax, which is you.
The answer, mate, in those situations is always to ask both, and you'll end up with two different answers. So you'll still be in the same position. Hopefully, Sarah's still watching. We actually did a podcast together, myself and Mikey and my business partner Phil, for Next Advisory on the What's Next podcast. Have a listen to that. But I don't think we've put it out yet. So I'm just hoping that Sarah might be able to tell me in the comments whether we've lost it or not, because I'd hate to have lost it. But Sarah's also got an ebook around steps to buying your first property. So she might be able to throw that in the comments too, that I saw she was working.
Yeah, he's a little machine. Good mortgage broker.
We love machines, right? Jeremy Muir, this sounds like one of those asking for a mate type things we've lacking a few details. What would your advice be to someone sitting with 600K equity in a property and has great cash flow? What size loan could potentially be attainable? Asking for a mate. You probably need to.
Just flip me an email, mate. That is a really open question. It's a little bit more complicated than that, my job.
Yeah. How do we get hold of you, mate? We can probably type Mikey.Smith
at loanmarket.co.nz.
And we do appreciate your time, mate, because we know that every minute is a minute that you're away from answering those phone calls that we've already heard in the background. So if anyone does want to drop Mike an email, he's very good at responding. He has to put up with my punishing emails and messages during the day as well. Anything, there's an email for me. Anything that we haven't touched on that you thought might be interesting for people to think about, mate?
Yeah, I think personally, I think we are going to continue to see some pressure on house prices in the upward direction. Some really cool stuff, which was good to see, about the mortgage repayment deferral, or commonly known as the mortgage holidays. That a massive percentage of those people have stopped and started paying their mortgage again. So that's really cool. I love seeing that kind of data.
Yeah.
Means there probably won't be any bargains around for anyone that's still waiting for it. It's probably not going to happen. They'd rather push interest rates down further and maintain stuff than let them fall and put pressure on people. If you are going to get into your first home and you're in a position, just get your approval. Get ready, because you need to go through the process. The process isn't like changing the ownership on your first car. It's a pretty steep learning curve. My job is actually getting the approval, but my job with the client is actually educating them around the process from start to finish. And yeah, don't get into it if you want to do it, but don't get too upset if they keep going. Just think of other ways,
Yeah. Hey, here's a question for you, mate, and this has been sent in to me. I'll read it off. If I had some dodgy transactions on my credit card, could I close my credit card down, and would the bank still look at that if I was doing a application for a mortgage?
So yeah, if you repaid your credit card in full and closed the credit card, the bank can ask for the statements, but we can say that you showed good financial discipline to be able to pay it down and then close it.
Very
so
good.
I've talked about it before, I think, but a loan application has all the numbers and everything in it and make sure that it fits the bank's requirements. But then a really important part, and I find it the most important part, is called a diary note. And that's basically client character. People get into a meeting with me and they're like, why do you want to know about what I was doing 3 years ago? And it's all because of that.
Yeah.
And it basically gives the bank something to look forward into the future and be like, yeah, we'll let them take on this 30-year loan because they've shown that they can do it, basically.
Nice. Well, Sarah's put a link to her ebook that she has at the moment with some practical tips to buying a property, so anyone can grab that and download that.
Shout out to the project.
There we go. What was I going to ask? Okay, so as well, new builds, like that's all a bit of a rage up here in Auckland, where people are, isn't that quite a good way to almost lock in a future price today and then wait a year for that to get built? Then you can either move in there or you can rent it out. If I was to rent it out, what percentage deposit do I need? Do I now need 30%?
So there's going to be some changes in this area, but if we go back to the old rules, which I think is where they're going to go before lockdown happened, then new builds with certain banks were actually exempt from the LVR restriction of 30%, and you could buy a rental property if it was brand new at 20% deposit. The theory there is that it's new and you're adding to the housing stock, and it's a safe investment with low maintenance, blah, blah, blah. And it's not as much as high risk lending as it might be for an existing 1960s something. But yeah, the new build stuff's awesome, mate. People forget. I talk to people and they don't realize it's happening. It's going to be massive. I think it's going to be one of the biggest parts of the market over the next 5 years.
Wow. Okay. New build. That's kind of what I'm looking at doing next year, mate. Just for full disclosure there. So it says Luke doesn't own a home, but maybe next year I could pop the old cherry. I've actually had a home in a prior life and sold it and made some poor financial choices. But hey, that's how we learn, and this is how we come to be sitting here today. So yeah, I've been doing a bit of research this year and might look further into that next year. So something for people to think about, new builds and how those work, and not necessarily buying something that's already there, but doing your research.
Yeah, they're generally really affordable. Depending on the bracket you're in, you get sort of first home grants. Hilden Dannyberg.
Throw it back.
But hey, yeah, they're going to be a massive part of our first home buyer stuff over the next few years.
And well, let's go tangent away from property for 5 or 10, because I know that you love dabbling in all sorts of things. Have you seen the price of Bitcoin today?
I haven't today, no, but I sort of, yeah. I just saw its like monumental rush over the last couple of months and have stopped looking.
Fair enough. It fell, but it's back now. I think it's hit an all-time high. So it's really interesting. I mean, I don't know heaps about crypto and Bitcoin and things, but I Googled Bitcoin price and clicked on the news, and there was one article saying why Bitcoin hasn't hit its all-time high. Then the next article was Bitcoin hits all-time high. I'm like, well, which one is it?
What's interesting about Bitcoin, and I am not an advisor in this space, but from what I look at, it looks like what's called the institutional money is starting to get poured into it. So even like big tech companies, I saw a big tech company that's got a whole lot of cash. I think you and Phil were talking about it the other day. They decided to just leave it in Bitcoin instead of sitting in the bank. There's hedge funds that are putting portions of their fund into it. And like what that does in my head is takes away like the volatility of it. So, last time when Bitcoin went crazy, however many years ago it was, and then it crashed like a ton of bricks, there was a massive chunk of that was called like the retail investor, like our sharesies people.
Yeah.
And that stuff, like when stuff gets hard, we need cash to go buy stuff. But institutional guys with billions, like literally billions, they don't need to get their $20 back to go and buy dinner, like it's a different type of thing.
Yeah.
So I think we might even see record highs and more stability. Sounds crazy.
Yeah.
I'm going to go buy one, eh? I'm going to buy a whole one.
There we go. Well, stay tuned, people. If Mikey buys a Bitcoin, we'll update the Facebook
page. Yeah.
Okay, mate. Well, we'll leave it there. We'll let you carry on with it. Thank you for your time again. Hopefully, if anyone does have any questions, feel free to add them, and I can pass them over to Mikey as well. Or even if you want to send a message, or just email Mikey, mikey.smith@loanmarket.co.nz. He's very good at getting back to people, and it sounds like you've educated quite a few people from the Keep the Change community, which is good because it's not something that you know a lot more about it than I. So it's cool to see you actually helping people out, and people tuning in and learning more about this stuff, because it can be pretty bloody daunting and also intimidating to ask questions around money and things, and we need to break the back of that so that people can go further and feel more secure in their decision making around finances.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's pretty cool when I get an email from someone that says, "Hey, such and such here, I saw your thing on Keep the Change. It's working, mate. That's cool. It's about education, so rock and roll."
Bloody good.
Also, Shout out to Sharesies for closing in on $1 billion worth of invested money.
Yeah, that is crazy, 900 million so far. So now, good on them. You know, at least people are learning more about the markets and things like that. I had someone email me the other day saying, "Hey, I've been doing everything you said not to do and trying to find the fastest gain and whatnot. What do you think the best ETF to get into is?" And I sort of said, "Well, A, it's good that you're asking that question, but B, have that awareness, but B, your question may still be on the wrong lines. You're trying to find the best, and I don't know that myself. Nobody does, and so it's all about learning for yourself, finding things that you're comfortable to be a part of. And I hope that people that are putting their money into shares is understanding that, because at the moment it just looks like everything's kind of going up, and you get that false sense of like, fuck, this is easy. Why have I not been doing this forever? But it's not always like that, right? And if you're looking at it every day, eventually you're going to start seeing some ups and some downs. And we saw $1.5 million of losses get locked in March, when people for the first time saw a share market crash and went, holy shit, get my KiwiSaver out of this.
Yeah, that was madness. I remember, at lockdown, I know how I should have thought, but I couldn't help myself from thinking the wrong way. Like, it's a weird. I reckon next time I'm definitely going to have it sorted.
Yeah, I know exactly what you meant. I remember just looking at all the stocks, being like, I've been waiting for this moment. I just need to buy more, and then I'm like, fuck. I think it was going to be a pandemic, though.
Yeah.
We're just going to go into turmoil just longer and longer. But hey, our response is unreal here in New Zealand, and we've sort of avoided that. But all good, mate. We better wrap it up there, otherwise we'll go on another rabbit hole of the stock market.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, mate. We'll chat soon.
Good to see ya.